Okay, so our facing is going to cover our lapel and is going to cover what we call the quarters, so this end here, and it's going to stretch all the way through the coat like that, and then we're going to have our lining come through to the other side, just like our waistcoat. So we're going to grab a bit of cloth. So you've already you blocked out a bit of cloth, which is the size of your facing. See if that's big enough. Okay. Let's grab this. And I'm just going to block it out. This is a slightly lighter session as well. So. Yeah. So lay that in there. So I might as well show you how to cut facing out for a check as well. So when we're cutting out the checks, we're always wanting to match wherever possible. And so one nice thing that we can do is, so before I go though, I'm skipping a step, I'm going to mark my front edge. So you're going to be straight on the mark stitch. I'm just going to draw my front edge in now. So you can do this straight on your mark stitch, lay a pattern in, or you can just draw it by chalk. And draw that curve as it goes down. I'm just slightly adapting the pattern, so just ignore this one a bit. So I've drawn the shape of my front edge in. I've got my button position there. And then I'm going to draw my lapel in. So I'm just going to make sure very quickly that I've got my point at the right place. Things are barely visible on tweed, unfortunately. And then I'm just gonna put my lapel in. So. So, okay, so I've got my peak drawn in, and I'm happy with that placement. All right, so first things first, quickly going to trim my front edge. So you can measure all of this out. I'm just, for the sake of time, going to have to go quickly. And I'm going to leave 3/8 of an inch going all the way round, except for at the gorge, where I'm going to cut it slightly differently. So I'm going to cut 3/8 into the gorge there, and then I'm going to trim 3/8 off the edge all the way. And then I'm going to come in about 4 inches from the front edge to there, and then chop out like that. Snip point off, and then I'm going to carry through just by raising on the mark stitch this edge, bringing it down. Okay, next step, you're going to trim your front edge itself, and you're going to want the canvas to finish 1/4 back from where your finished mark is, or 3/8 back from where your finished mark is, so that your seam allowance and your canvas end butting each other. So we're going to almost trim this back basically 3/4 of an inch all the way through. So you can give yourself some guides. I've got a finger. So I'm going to do this in coloured chalk. So I'm going to cut this back 3/4 of an inch all the way through. In some areas I'm already there. And the same coming down. Okay. Trim this back. Same, cut down to my gorge, only on the canvas. And cut my point out. There. Okay, cute. So we've displaced our canvas from our front edge, and so when our seam turns in, it's going to come and meet our front edge so that none of the allowances are going to come on top of one another. So we're thinning and feathering our edge. Yeah. The next step we're going to do is tape our edge. Get rid. Oh, sorry. This momentarily. A strip of lining. I'm going to use fusible tape. I think Greg's just stolen it. One second. Okay. So I'm going to tape the edge. Why? Because it's just a little bit quicker. And saves you having to cut out some linings, stretching them, etc. So, but on the video, I think I use tape. Right, so there. We're going to start over here at the point. Before I do that, so what can tend to happen at this area here is as the lapel rolls round, you can accidentally accumulate length in here, and that edge of the canvas can get a bit troublesome. So we're just going to send a little paste in. If I can find. So I do this in white so I can see it from the outside and take it out afterwards. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, it's just an extra little step. So I'm rolling the lapel back, forcing the button position out. There, forcing it out on the canvas, and then rolling the lapel here, coming through, and then I'm going to make sure that as it rolls on the break line, there, all of the cloth is sitting sucked into the canvas, like so. So I'm pushing the cloth out and getting just a bit of length into the canvas in this section. And that's going to help support all of that in. And then this will come out once the front edge is sewn. And because it's white, you're going to see it from the other side, and you're going to be able to take it out from the outside. Just that. And that makes sure that you get this nice sort of rolling effect to the lapel. Which we're looking for. Okay, so now we're going to tape. I'm going to start at the bottom, and you can come, if you want, all the way through. So I'm going to leave a little excess there where the bottom is. There, and I'm going to displace my tape just slightly off from the front edge, this raw edge over here. You can also narrow your tape if you want to. Might be wise in this case, it's looking a bit wide. I'm just going to split this in half. Okay, so we're going to leave an excess there for our tape, and we're going to offset our tape so it's definitely on the canvas by about 1/4 of an inch, and it's coming off our raw edge by about a good 1/8. So again, staggering all of that in. And what you're going to do might be easier for me to start from the top. Actually, what you're going to do is just fell it onto the canvas. Just going to trim that back, straight, and then just overlapping. It's going to be 1/8 off the edge of our canvas, and I'm over here felling it onto the canvas. So at the lapel, I can afford to go all the way through because, oh fucking hell, it's padded in. I'm not worried about the stitch shining through too much, and I'm just going to lay this on. No length in it, just flat onto the coat. There. Tack off at the peak, and then we're going to cut our canvas there and keep going. So you can see what that little bubble has formed from that little base over there. It's added us a little bit of length on the canvas. Keep going through. So again, we're just going to go down the canvas. Small little pad stitch all the way along, and don't pull your tape here. It's really important that you make sure that it doesn't become tight for all the reasons that we've already stated. It can be even a little loose, that's fine, but it's certainly not tight. Once I get past the end of my lapel, where there's no more pad stitching, I'm only going to catch the canvas itself, not the top cloth. I obviously don't want this stitch to be visible on the right side of my coat. I wouldn't judge you for watching losing videos, I'd be bored too. Alright. So again, I'm not tight. Just a reminder, I'm not catching the cloth here. I'm pushing the cloth out of the way every time I make a stitch.
So it's just on the canvas?
So from here to here, just the canvas, because obviously that's the right side. Yeah. From there to there, I don't care. That's the wrong side. You've already padded that. All the stitches are visible to some small degree, so I'm not worried. But over here, I don't want the stitch to be visible, which is why you've only canvas that 4-part in, a good inch back from the front edge to give you room to be able to get that stitch in. And also to be able to trim it. So as I come in here, this is where it's a bit weird, I'm going to slightly pull tight on the tape. And I want the tape to start gathering a little bit of a pull on the coat. And you'll see it's starting to raise up. Shot in the dark. Anyone have a theory as to why we might be doing this? What could pulling the tape tight do in this area? What's happening to the tape as I pull it tight? In what direction is it coming? Away or towards the wearer? Yeah. And what's that going to have as an effect on the front of the coat? Opposite. It's going to bring the coat towards the body of the person, right? So all these tiny little bits to try and get this jacket to like stick to something. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to leave that off and I'm going to keep it going afterwards. But we can now press this all into place. So we're going to go to the board and we're just going to tease all of that flat. not too happy with this, but I haven't got time to correct it. But ideally, this shouldn't have quite as much. You can get ones that are cut on a slight bias, or you can get bias tape itself, and it's got just enough give to like collapse a bit, but such is life. So you can give it a few little nicks. Okay, so cutting out the facing itself. So if we were to do a check job, you just block out the facing with some extra bits at the top and the bottom, so that you could match a check going through. So what I want is for a stripe to match up with my lapel. So if I lay this flat and I find the first stripe coming down from my point, I can see it's this one. So I want a stripe to come from my lapel down and meet the seam back from the edge, this stripe here. So I'm going to lay that stripe in like that. And also, I don't want a red stripe coming too close to my front edge, because the edge of the lapel is carving in. I don't want a stripe disappearing very soon. So I'm actually going to displace the stripe almost as far back as it can go, so that it looks like the lapel's running a little bit more straight down. So I'm on the stripe there with my edge. I've got my stripe lined up across. I position my full part in. Everything's looking tidy. Okay, and then I can chop this out. So, mark this through. We're going to go about halfway the width there. You've already done this. Down. Up. And then I'm going to mark this down. And what I'm doing is I'm lining up the edge of my point here as far along the edge of my grain as I can, and then I'm letting the lapel run off, because I want my break line and my stripes to be running parallel to one another. So I mark that down to my button, and then at my button I mark a point down here, displace a 1/2 inch, and I shift that over, and then I remark this edge going down. And that's where my point is going to be, and I'm going to cut my facing a little bit further in. And, oh, forgot to do one thing. I'm just going to make sure that I've got enough coverage on the inside. So I want to be about at the dart over here. So I've got plenty of excess to cover all my little bits. Okay. So I'm just going to match this in and then chop both out. Any ideas why we swing the full part against the facing over here? What do you think that's going to do? Okay, so let's look at this coat. Okay, what shape is the coat taking? Is it flat? No, it's got mounds. What shape is the facing? It's a flat bit of cloth. What happens if we put a flat bit of cloth underneath against something that's got mounds? What could happen? If I put a flat bit of cloth straight underneath this, and I try and get it to stick to what's above it, what could occur? Yeah, and so again, relative layering, we've got our bubbling occurring. So what do we need?
More fabric.
More fabric, and then what happens if I swing my forepad on this? It's displacing the forepart back, facing back, and it's bringing that extra fabric in, yeah? Straight down. Okay. Don't combine until next week. Okay. So I've got my right side facing now. I'm going to lay that in. Struck everything out to match, so I don't need to worry too much about bits and bobs. I've got my point here, which I need to get in, and I'm just going to facing down. Okay, so we're going to deal with the point afterwards. We're first going to concentrate on our front edge. All right, so do we want the facing filled in against the forepart at the lapel, or do we want the forepart filled in against the facing at the lapel, i.e. do we want extra length on the facing or extra length on the forepart at the lapel? What needs to be tight?
The facing needs to be tight.
Okay, and then down here?
The full part.
So I start a little down from the point, and as I'm going along, I'm going to make sure that I'm not on my stitch line, so I'm maybe a 1/4 inch in, and I'm going to pull. It's so light, just a little bit of length into my forepart and a little bit of tightness into my facing, really subtly. Once I get to my button, I'm going to do the opposite. Got to my button, I'm going to back tack, and then now I'm going to start pulling my forepart tight against my facing. So now I'm doing this as opposed to that. And as I'm going along, I'm matching edge to edge, and that's giving me all my length through here, which is going to help me prevent any tightness of my facing against my forepart at chest level. And then as I'm coming down here, I'm going to, at the curve, again switch it up. So I've gotten to my curve here, back tack, and here I'm going to start pulling my facing tight. Reason being is I want the facing to be doing exactly what the tape is doing as well, and to be sucking the coat into the wearer again. So I'm laying that flat, letting it go where it wants to. And then I'm pulling my facing tight against my forepart. I'm trying to get my forepart to lift a little bit, just like that. Carry that down to about there, and then go flat again. Pretty much. What we don't want is for that length to go, just make sure it's laying flat. Up to the point where we stop sewing our facing at this mark there. Alright, that's in place. Now we can deal with the point. So remember what we did on our flap. So you can see how my forepart is now sort of going like that. It's tucking in, great. What did we do on the flap in order to get the seams to curl in? Remind me. Yeah. And we're going to do the same thing at the point of the lapel. So it's a really narrow little element. If we don't give extra cloth over that point, we're not going to be able to pull our edges in. And what will happen is that point, rather than coming straight, will get tight and will come into a little sort of narrow, curvy, disgusting little thing. So we need to get length in, and we need to get length into the facing, both coming up and then also coming across. So some people do it from the other side. So I've got my edge there, sewn in, basted in. I'm now going to start filling in. So little bubbles of fullness coming in like this. Ever so slight. There. and then flip it. And now I've got some length in. I also want to get some width in. I'm just going to pull that over, and I'm going to get that little bubble sitting in place just like that. I'm also getting length into this peak at this area. And this is absolutely crucial to you actually being able to turn the point out properly. Alright, and you can see how I've got all of this stuff just floating in there. I'm now going to go and machine this. And you can mark for where you're going to machine, or you can go straight in. I'm going to go straight in. I may mark just the point of the lapel, because that's quite handy. I'm going to mark my edge there. So this needs to be fairly precise. There, and at the tip I'm just going to stub it ever so slightly. Right, so let's go to the machine. Just not facing. Alright, so we're going to start from the bottom here. We're sewing 3/8 in, and I know I need to start just a little bit past where the pumpkin made is. Just over here. You can come in. So I'm going to back tap, and I'm just going to go through. You can trace this line if you feel more comfortable tracing it. The point is you should be sewing on your tape. Okay, so coming into my point, come in, I do 1 point across, and then I come down. our press, our iron, and we're going to grab an edge board. Give me one sec. Take my paste out. seam is going to end, the canvas is going to come in, and none of it is going to fall in the same place. Here, we're going to stick our shears in straight to our points. We're going to cut just shy of our lock stitch. And stagger. Alright, we can go back to the board. So again, just like on our points for the flap, you're going to prep the seams before you turn them out. There. And then guide it all through. There we go. Now for the point, again, you're ending it by pulling it out. Delicately, and stopping just shy of your stitch. Once it's flat, you're happy. You've got to sort of pulley it into the shape that you want it to be. That, and then we'll perfect it with the iron. There. Alright, so now we're going to start displacing our seam just like on our flap. So we'll start with the button. So find where your button is. So button position's there. And I'm going to displace my seam back 1/8 of an inch. And again tacking it out. And go all the way down. Because you've already done a lot of pressing, it'll come out really nicely. And you won't have to do much tugging or pulling. I'm going really quick here, you can take your time. And as you get into the bottom of the coat, you're helping the facing to curve upwards, just pulling it in. side, we're going the other way and displacing the seam to the back of the lapel. There. And as I'm going along here, I'm being attentive to the shape of the lapel. I want this to be perfectly sort of linear. I don't want any bumps on it. So I'm controlling the edge by displacing the seam more or less so that it is looking nice and even. Okay, done that. You can do a second stitch if you want. I'm not going to bother today, I haven't got time. In the video I do. We're then going to lay a square off from the break line. Make sure that everything's looking nice and flat. So that's just on the break line there. I'm going to flip it back. You've got the lapel coming in there. You can see how my check is matching into my full part. And then you're going to run a baste. And so can you see how the lapel is curling that way? I want it to go that way. So I'm just going to funnel a bit more facing through and control how much extra length I need on the top of the lapel to get that facing to curl round. So I'm literally bringing in tiny bits of cloth as I'm doing this, and I'm getting that lapel to go the other way. Once you're happy with how much you've got, you can baste it into place. Can be a bit tricky to get in, but once you've got it, you'll feel it's right. There. Yep. So right on the break line, we're going to secure that extra length in, and you'll see quite how much cloth is actually in there in a second when I lay it flat, in theory. And now, going up the other way. You see all of that? Yep. But once it's turned, it disappears. Yeah. Okay, last bit. Just gonna cut the bottom of the coat very quickly. So, you see how my casing is coming up? And very quickly here, I'm going to lay mark stitch of the bottom against the end of the fore part, and I'm just going to baste that into place so that I can then secure my facing through the full part. So at the outbreast, you're going to have to go round, but here you don't have to worry about that. And can you see how that extra length, it's ever so slight, but it means that the facing can now have just that little excess against the chest. There. And I'm going to face that in, so you can add some pins if you want to help you out. So I want, remember this to curl in, so I'm just going to apply a little bit tightness, just ever so slight across the width, so that the coat has a tendency to do that. If I go too much, I'm going to create a problem. There, and then you're going to use this weird little stitch to tack it into place onto the canvas. Kind of like a basty back stitch. I don't know why we do it, but it's been done for yonks and that's the way it is. But you can just do a pad if you want. And I do that all the way up, and I stop so that I can put my shoulder pad in about there. Alright? I'll let you get on.